I want to talk to you today about how to teach the Bible without using words. How to teach the Bible without using words. Paul said, "We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel." We share the gospel, and you teachers should share the gospel, but you should do something else. He said, "We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel, but our lives as well." It reminds us that Christianity, that Christian living, that discipleship is as much caught, like a disease. It's caught as much as taught. It reminds me of a question a new teacher asked me one time, and the question was, how much time should I spend preparing for my lesson? Should I spend an hour? Should I spend 2 hours? Should I spend 5 hours? Should I spend 10 hours? Should I spend 30 hours? I've talked to several teachers over the years who spend 30 hours a week preparing for their lesson. And this young teacher asked me, how much time should I spend in preparation for my lesson? To which I responded by saying, I think you ought to spend as little as possible. As little as possible. And there's several reasons for that. One reason is people don't really care. They don't care if you spend an hour or 5 hours or 10 hours or 30 hours. What they care is, do you have something to say when you show up? And every now and then you'll find a wonderful video that illustrates the point, that communicates the point that you want to communicate that day. And you're going to just show that video, and you're not going to spend hardly any time in preparation at all. And at the end of the day, people don't really care. But another thing is, the less time you spend in preparation, the more time you can spend with the folks. The more time you can hang out with them and play cards with them and go to lunch with them and play golf with them and so on. And Christian living, that discipleship, is as much caught as it is taught. And the classic verses that deals with this is Mark 3:14 that says, "He appointed 12 that they might be with him." That they might be with him. And this is what you want to do, teacher. You want to gather around you some disciples, and you want to spend time with them so they can catch your love for God and become infected with that. One of the classic verses or books that deals with this, I highly encourage you to read. The Master Plan of Evangelism, 3 million copies sold. Billy Graham wrote the foreword to this book, and it is a great book. I'd like to read you a little excerpt from this. "Having called his men, Jesus made a practice of being with them. This was the essence of his training program, just letting his disciples follow him. And when one stops to think of it, this was an incredibly simple way of doing it. Jesus had no formal school, no seminaries, no outlined course of studies, no periodic membership classes in which he enrolled his followers. None of these highly organized procedures, considered so necessary today, entered into his ministry. Amazing as it may seem, all Jesus did to teach these men his way was to draw them close to himself. He was his own school and his own curriculum. The natural informality of this teaching method of Jesus stood in striking contrast to the formal, almost scholastic procedure of the scribes. And it stands in contrast to much of what we think about teaching today. That we think about teaching, we think about getting in straight rows and sitting in a classroom and doing PowerPoint and so on. And Jesus' teaching was hanging out with his men. And if you want to make disciples of the people that God has called you to serve, you want to simply hang out to them. These religious teachers insisted on their disciples adhering strictly to certain rituals and formulas of knowledge which distinguished them from others, whereas Jesus asked only that his disciples follow him. Knowledge was not communicated by the master in terms of laws and dogmas, but in the living personality of the one who walked among them. His disciples were distinguished not by outward conformity to certain rituals, but by being with him and thereby participating in his doctrine. Another writer that's written about this is Dawson Trotman, arguably the best disciple maker in the last 100 years. Billy Graham actually canceled a meeting to come and do his funeral and said that he had impacted more people than anyone else he knew. And Dawson Trotman said about this process of discipling, he said, Jesus didn't say to his men, here by the seaside of Galilee, "Listen to me, and I will make you fishers of men." Nor did he say to these hardy men, "Read some of my books on the subject, and you will become fishers of men." No, Jesus said to them, "Follow me." And for the next 3 years, they did just that. Seldom did Jesus teach with mere words, but he taught by demonstration, by illustration, by living out his own life before them. In the Navigators, the organization that Dawson Trotman founded, in the Navigators, we call this the with them principle. And it is based on the whole context of the Gospels, but particularly the verse like Mark 3:14. He had ordained 12 that they should be with him and that he might send them forth to preach. And you, teacher, if you want to make disciples, you want to be an effective Bible teacher, one of the things that you want to do is to try to carve out as much time as you can to spend time casually with the men and women that God would lead you to make disciples of.